Hello, you're watching the Daily Report for December 1st. On the back of global concerns over Omicron, Korea's daily tally has surged to a new high, while the number of severe infections has hit above 700 also for the first time. I have Kwon Soo standing by. So let's start with the local COVID-19 update.
Right, Sunny, let's begin with this unprecedented number of new infections here in Korea. 5,123 cases were posted as of 12 a.m., marking the first time that Korea is surpassing 5,000. And it's also more than 5,000 domestic transmissions alone. So we usually have a higher number by the middle of the work week. However, even if you compare the figure to last Wednesday, it's an on-week surge by around 1,000 infections. Also, an all-time high was posted here in the capital, Seoul, with 2,222, more than 1,500 in Gyeonggi-do province, followed by 326 in Incheon. Also here, triple digits in the southern part of the country. And also, Korea has reported 34 additional fatalities, raising the death toll to 3,658. The number of patients that are currently in severe or critical condition has also hit an all-time high, reaching to above 700 after 6 days straight in the 600s. Let's move over to our vaccination figures. Here we've got a milestone. 80% of the nation's population has received at least 2 doses or is now fully vaccinated. That's more than 41 million. And when it comes to the booster shot campaign, we're seeing more people getting their additional doses on a daily basis, with over 184,000 people who got their additional dose on the day before. Now let's move over to some figures abroad. There's been a rise in both daily infections as well as fatalities in the past day. And if we go over to the 20 countries with the highest number of caseloads, the Netherlands has become the country with the 20th highest number of cases in the past day, with over 22,000 new infections. And South Africa has also, the caseload has doubled in the past day, which stood at around 2,000 yesterday, and now more than 4,000 new infections. And those are the general updates I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
Right, so thank you. Right, Korea, for its part, has yet to confirm its first case of the Omicron variant, but investigations are underway into a few suspected cases. For more, I have Kim Yeon-seung here in the studio. Yeon-seung, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Sunny.
Right, Yeon-seung, let's first start off then with the overall COVID-19 situation here.
Right, so as Soa updated us earlier, South Korea reached a new peak in terms of daily COVID-19 cases. One expert says, though, that South Korea may see double this tally in less than 2 months, 10,000 daily cases by late January, if there are no changes to our current prevention measures. He considered a number of factors, including the rate of increase in new infections, which has been climbing around 15% every week for the past 3 to 4 weeks, to arrive to this conclusion. Ironically enough, he also said that because South Korea was relatively successful in their prevention efforts, the country is likely to take a harder hit when COVID-19 restrictions loosen up. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Countries in the West have seen much larger caseloads and spreads so far, so they have a higher proportion of people who have gained immunization after being infected. But since we've relatively succeeded in staving off infections, the toll we might take in the future may be far greater.
He added that the emergence of Omicron has also the potential to speed up this harrowing prediction. Assuming that rolling back restrictions is not on the cards, vaccine protection and oral treatment remains key to battling the spread.
Right, and Yeon-seung, on the topic of Omicron, do tell us a bit about Korea's suspected cases.
Right, so news just broke out about a confirmed Omicron patient passing through Incheon International Airport before making his way over to Japan. But I'll fill you in more on this later during our later talk. First, South Korea has reported its first suspected cases of Omicron from a couple that had visited Nigeria, and officials have reason to suspect that they were infected with the Omicron strain because Canada and Hong Kong have also seen Omicron infections in travelers from Nigeria. Health authorities discovered that they had come into contact as well and transmitted the virus to their teenage child and one of their acquaintances. So currently, there are 4 people in South Korea who are suspected to have been infected with Omicron. The test results for this to determine whether they're infected with this strain will come out later tonight.
Right, so just to verify, we have news about a confirmed patient who passed through Incheon International Airport. But here in the country, in Korea, we have 4 suspected cases as we speak.
Exactly.
Right then, is Korea taking any further steps to address this latest threat?
Well, for starters, Korea is talking about tightening its border controls. So the Blue House on Tuesday said in a written statement that President Moon Jae-in had ordered officials to take necessary steps in order to fend off this new strain, because it has the potential to become a national health threat that could derail our containment efforts. President Moon had ordered officials to strengthen prevention measures for incoming travelers, to quickly modify test kits so it can identify Omicron variants, and to cooperate with international bodies and experts to discuss an appropriate response for this newly emerged variant. So as for travel restrictions, South Korea currently hasn't added any more countries to its no-fly list, but authorities said that they will extensively test for variants among foreign arrivals.
Right. All right, Young-seung, thank you for now. Stay with us for the extended talks. Right, staying in the local arena, we turn now to the latest official assessment of the COVID-19 situation here and related containment efforts with our Kwon Soa. Soa, what do you have for us?
Right, Sunny. Over 5,000 cases and more than 700 patients in severe critical condition. It is an alarming rise, but it was not unforeseen, with officials this Wednesday citing such predictions as the reason for the temporary halt and a further easing of measures as was announced on Monday. So in line with the government's focus on bolstering medical capacity to handle the rise in patients that need intensive care, Interior Minister Chon Hae-chol told a pan-governmental meeting this Wednesday that all possible administrative power will be mobilized and that by mid-December, more than 1,300 more hospital beds will be made available. He added that the government will hold discussions with the committee in charge of the Living with COVID-19 scheme this week on whether additional measures such as restrictions to private gatherings in the capital region, new rules regarding unvaccinated customers at cafes and restaurants, and extension of those subject to vaccine passes may have to be considered. And officials also renewed calls on getting vaccinated not just twice, but 3 times, stressing that the effects of booster shots start to show immediately.
Getting an additional vaccine dose is not a choice, but a necessity. We ask those who are eligible for a 3rd shot to get their boosters as soon as possible. As of today, 3.22 million people out of the 14.65 million eligible have received their extra doses, for a rate of 22%.
Right, so the 3rd dose is not a choice but a necessity. And speaking about the importance of vaccination, so I believe authorities are reiterating calls, that is, for teenage inoculation. Tell us more.
Right, Sunny. Noting that it's been 10 days now since the full-fledged reopening of schools, Education Minister Yoo Eun-hae said the difficult path towards the resumption has been put at crossroads with daily cases at around 3,000 to 4,000, as well as the risks posed by the Omicron variant. However, it's not necessarily due to more kids being in their classrooms. Let's take a listen.
The proportion of cases linked to schools did not increase notably when comparing the infection rates from before and after the full reopening of schools. However, cases with unknown sources of transmission are continuing to rise, pointing to a higher risk of infection in the wider community.
So a growing number of student infections were observed following the full resumption of in-person learning amid a rise in the overall case count. In September, children and teenagers made up 6.1% of total infections, in October 9.1%, and November 8%, so actually a decline last month from the previous month in terms of proportion. Nevertheless, currently some 18% of infected kids are hospitalized at medical facilities, with half of them in serious or critical condition. To bolster vaccinations among teenagers, the Education Ministry set a special vaccination support period from the 13th to the 24th this month, where vaccination teams will make visits to schools.
Right. Meanwhile, so there has been much concern over intentions to make home treatment the norm. How are authorities responding to that?
Well, there was actually an official in charge of home treatment at the earlier government briefing to alleviate such concerns. He had this to say.
Home treatment is not a new system that has been adopted recently. It was first introduced back in October 2020, and around 40,000 patients in total have been treated at home since then. I can also tell you that over 95% of these patients made a full recovery after receiving home treatment.
As of Tuesday, almost 2,000 people are being treated at home, with more than 90% of those in the metropolitan region. Officials this Wednesday have held consultations with the medical sector to make the system more effective. Managing capacity, health kits, staff, etc. are to be expanded, and a mental support system for those being treated at home is also to be introduced.
I see. All right, then let's now venture beyond national borders, Yun-Sung, to countries elsewhere where reports of new Omicron, that is, cases have been reported. Tell us more, Yun-Sung.
Well, neighboring Japan just confirmed its first case of Omicron. The infected patient was a Namibian diplomat arriving from his home country. And as I've mentioned before, concerns are mounting as this patient was recently found to have stopped over in South Korea's Incheon International Airport before heading over to Japan. Authorities are now scrambling to figure out the scope of the impact he might have had on the local population. Brazil also became the first country in Latin America to detect an Omicron variant within their borders. Brazilian authorities found the variant strain among 2 travelers coming in from South Africa. In Europe, at least 44 Omicron cases have been reported in total, spanning over 11 countries in the region. You know, Sunny, a new study shows that health experts have reason to suspect that the Omicron variant has been circulating in Europe even before South Africa detected this new strain and alerted the WHO. In the Netherlands, a Dutch health institute had traced this mutated virus strain among patient samples that date from November 19th to the 23rd. Remember, South Africa sent early warning signs to the WHO on November 24th, so this variant could have been running rampant earlier and in more regions than health authorities have previously thought.
That's quite a concern, but also what's a concern is this declining vaccination efficacy with Omicron that's suspected currently, because in Israel just recently there were 2 doctors confirmed with this new variant, and with that Israel has now 4 cases in total, and these doctors actually already got their 3rd, so booster shot, and still were infected with this variant.
Right, and talking about efficacy, Yun-Sung, what has been shared about the efficacy of our current treatment options for Omicron?
Well, early tests do show that the current methods of treatment that we have on hand may be less effective against the Omicron variant. So right now, COVID-19 antibody treatments from Regeneron and Eli Lilly are widely used for COVID-19 patients. But separate preliminary tests show that the effectiveness of these drugs may be lessened when it comes to the Omicron variants. But since these tests are very early, scientists are refraining from drawing up any conclusive statements from these results. And if they do turn out to be true, though, current treatments on hand may need to be modified.
Right, I see. Also, Yun-Sung, there are many questions now about the emergence of this particular variant. What do we know so far?
Well, let me start by giving you a brief overview on how a variant virus is formed. So viruses typically survive by hijacking human cells, and they use their spike protein to enter the human cells, and then they use the human cells as vessels to replicate themselves within. But every so often, viruses misprint their copies, and they produce a slightly altered genetic code. And this virus, with a typo in its code, becomes this new variant virus. So it's of little surprise that COVID-19 has been able to create so many versions of the variant since it's a virus that's been breeding inside the bodies of more than 260 million people worldwide. Now, this particular variant, Omicron, has been pegged as particularly worrisome because it has more than 30 mutations in its spike protein, twice that of Delta. So this gives scientists enough reason to suspect that the Omicron variant would find it easier to unlock and enter human cells.
It's just frightening even thinking about it.
It is. And just adding on to that, in the case of the Omicron variant, scientists are now suggesting that it may have first emerged from an AIDS patient. And that has been mentioned by a number of experts, including a top German immunology expert who said the surprising number of mutations in the Omicron variant could signal that it has originated in a patient with HIV, that is. And I don't want to jump into conclusions, but according to figures by the U.S. CIA, in South Africa, around 20% of people are AIDS patients, which would mean there could be a higher potential of why this variant has emerged in that area.
Right. Well, as experts have been saying, so it will take weeks before we have concrete data. But in the meantime, do keep us posted. So thank you. And Yonson, thank you for your contribution this week. Here on the local front, there have been notable changes in the pursuit of academic interests beyond borders amid the pandemic and emergence of variants, that is, including Omicron. We have details in this next report.
A study abroad fair was held at a convention center in Seoul for prospective international students. Only those who made a reservation in advance could attend the fair due to the pandemic. At here, we could meet a lot of students wishing to study abroad.
영국으로 가려고 하고요. 석사 밟으려고 가려고 하고 있어요. 코로나는 생각보다 그렇게 걱정이 되지는 않고 백신만 맞고 가면 괜찮을 것 같아요.
한국도 위드 코로나 하면서 다들 그냥 제한 풀고 하는 거 보니까 어쩔 수 없이 안고 가야 할 문제인 것 같아서 코로나가 불안해도 가는 게 낫겠다라고 생각했어요.
Now, South Korea's Suneung, or college entrance exam, is over, and we have about a month left until the new year. And there should be a lot of students who look forward to studying abroad for the upcoming year, but the pandemic has made it difficult.
After the outbreak of COVID-19, countries around the world imposed border restrictions, and that resulted in a decrease in the number of international students, and Korea is no exception. The number of Korean international students that hovered around the 200,000 range has decreased by half in 14 years.
코로나 때문에 사실상 호주 같은 경우에는 락다운이 걸려가지고 사실상 호주 유학생들이 입국이 안 됐었어요. 그래가지고 거의 못 들어오다시피 했었는데
작년 같은 경우에는 학생이 이제 감소한 이유 중에 첫 번째가 이제 학생들이 아무래도 미국 상황이 좋지 않으니까 유학을 오는 것을 좀 꺼려했었고 또 이제 행정부 문제도 좀 있었고요.
Concerns over COVID-19 led some students to delay or give up studying abroad.
해외 유학생들이 외국에서 혹시라도 코로나에 감염이 됐을 때 외국에서 치료를 받지 못할 수도 있다라는 그 두려움들이 가장 컸었고요. 그래서 감소한 원인 제일 컸을 것이고, 두 번째는 비자 문제일 겁니다. 아무래도 각 국가에서 그 외국인들의 입국을 제한을 했기 때문에 특히 가장 그 영향을 받은 게 학생들이거든요.
Some of the students who were studying abroad even returned home earlier than scheduled.
So I came to Korea in March because Tufts University actually asked all of the students to pack up and leave their dormitories by the end of the week. So it was rather shocking, and I know a lot of people went through the pandemic and had much more harder situations than me, such as students who are looking for jobs in the job market. At least I was able to come to grad school, but I know everything was just up in the air, and it was very hard for a lot of my friends because there just weren't any jobs that were open. There were no positions.
Then is there any change in the number of foreign students entering South Korea? Currently, the South Korean government manages international students according to changes in overseas COVID-19 situations. The number of international students coming to Korea has also decreased compared to before COVID-19. However, statistics have shown that the number of international students for degree programs has increased despite the pandemic.
정부에서도 잘 대응을 해준 것 같아요. 잘 대응해주고 특히 이제 성동구청이 다른 구청보다 굉장히 엄격하게 이 유학생 관리하는데 많이 도움을 줬고 특히 이제 학위과정생은 많이 증가했고요. 저희가 또 그 한글을 가르치는 어학원이 있는데 어학원은 20년에 잠깐 내려갔다가 다시 회복돼서 지금 너무 많이 학생이 와서 걱정할 정도입니다.
Some say that the power of the so-called Hallyu or Korean wave has contributed to the increase in the number. And industry officials are expecting such a move would revive the study abroad market.
내년에는 대부분의 수업이 대면으로 전환될 것으로 보이면서 유학생들은 앞으로 늘어날 것으로 저희도 예상을 하고 있고요. 코로나 때문에 유학을 포기하셨거나 유학을 미루셨던 분들도 다시 유학을 좀 계획을 하고 있는 것으로 보입니다.
상황이 좀 호전될 것으로 이제 희망적으로 보고 있는데 그 계획하는 학생들은 다 그 백신 접종 꼭 하시고 그리고 또 그 각 국가별로 각 학교별로 방역 조치 잘 준수하시면서 지혜롭게 그 유학생활 하실 것으로 그렇게 생각하고 있습니다.
COVID-19 will never be able to stop students from desiring to study more. However, as long as the pandemic goes on, the concerns of students who want to study abroad are expected to continue for a while. This has been 신세병.
BTS fans are in Los Angeles as we speak, partaking in the group's first in-person performance tour since the start of the pandemic that comes on the heels of top marks at the American Music Awards as well as a Grammy nomination, that is. For more, I have music critic Kim Young-dae here in the studio. Young-dae, welcome back.
Good afternoon.
I also have Hugh McIntyre, a music journalist who contributes to the Forbes. It's a pleasure to have you with us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Young-dae, I'll start with you then. Let's begin with the significance of BTS's Los Angeles tour amid this pandemic.
I wish I was there. I heard it's packed with 50,000 people per day. So it's substantially the biggest event since the pandemic era. And you know, this large-scale event, with this large-scale event, BTS, you know, proving once again they're the biggest in the game. And I think, especially this time of the year, and especially after their winning Artist of the Year at American Music Award and Grammy nomination or Grammy snub a few days after, they you know, successfully hosted this kind of event. You know, it almost feels like a kind of showcase to the Grammy committees or whoever they are, that they're doing their own thing, whether they're not nominated or they're winning the Artist of the Year or not, they're themselves. And it's full of typical ARMY BTS collaboration, you know, fan chants in Korean, 2 miles long line for the merchandise purchase. Well, but anyway, BTS is back and concert season is back, and finally they're really trying to showcase that they're still at the top of the game.
Right. And Hugh, BTS performed 2 sold-out shows, as Young-dae mentioned, this past weekend, and will be on stage yet again later on this Wednesday and again on Thursday. Now, what has been the media response to this in-person reunion between BTS and its ARMY over in the US?
I think a lot of US publications are talking about this. There's a lot to discuss. You know, first it's the first big shows back. I mean, 50,000 people in a room. We couldn't have imagined that a year ago. So whether it's BTS or anyone else, we're just so happy to have that happening again. I also think that despite all their commercial success in America, there's still a subset of the population that is waking up to who BTS is. They're hearing them for the first time. They're learning who they are. So finding out that they can sell out this stadium in Los Angeles night after night after night and play to hundreds of thousands of people is shocking, and it makes for a great headline for an audience that might not know them as well as, say, the South Korean audience.
Right. And Hugh, aside from the record ticket sales, I understand the ripple effects of BTS's tour is being felt by local businesses there. Could you tell us more?
Sure. So there are certainly people at these shows who are in Los Angeles or they're nearby, but a large percentage of people going to these shows are traveling, whether that's from somewhere else in the United States, somewhere else in California, or maybe internationally. So we're talking about flights and hotels and Airbnbs, restaurants, shops, taxis, Uber, on and on and on. So when you have thousands, tens of thousands, even 100,000 people coming to the city for one event, that's a lot of money. And so it's always going to be fantastic to see them and then have them visit. But let alone that it's been a year and a half since the city has experienced that type of boom, these fans and the money that they're bringing is so welcome to the stadium, to the businesses, to the entire city.
Right, that is good to know.
You just can't believe before you actually see.
I'm sure.
See what's happening there. You know,
I would love to be there.
Favorite Korean restaurant is packed with Caucasian and African American customers, and they're marching, fan chanting, even at the restaurant, and just marching in the streets, singing favorite BTS song. It's amazing. It's always amazing, and
sure
traffic.
Right. The traffic as well. Youngdae, BTS, like you mentioned, going back to the Grammy Awards now, it secured a nomination for Best Group Performance for the second straight year. But as you pointed out, it was not included in the major categories of the 2022 Grammy Awards. What are your thoughts? Okay,
before I sincerely criticize Grammy Committee, let's not forget that they won the Artist of the Year at AMA. We're talking about the American Music Award, right? The Artist of the Year used to be, going to Taylor Swift, or, Michael Jackson or Mariah Carey, the top favorite superstar in the U.S. Now it's kind of like a crowning moment as an Asian artist to become a #1 artist in the U.S. So that itself is a huge accomplishment without the nomination of Grammy or anything else. But the Grammy Award, it's the really unique award, because everyone's saying that Grammy is the most historic and the most traditional, legitimate award because of that the tradition, longest tradition. It's the first, the substantial music award by the Recording Academy, and it's voted by the small number of, group of people. It's anonymous. We don't know who they are actually. All we know is that they're professional with a substantial career in music business, so they're legitimate, but it's kind of like a microcosm of American society. So all we know is that they're predominantly white, male, over 40 or 50. So overall, there's a tendency that they have a more conservative musical taste. They're not consciously against the foreign music or Asian music, but it's not really their taste, like being boy band, being Asian, singing mostly in Korean and dance music. So with that kind of disadvantagement, still BTS achieved a lot, to be nominated in the Best Pop Duo or Group. Possibly they can win, but still they have to be respected more because of the impact and magnitude they made throughout this whole year. So that's why U.S. media, not just Korean media, but U.S. major outlets, heavily criticized the attitude and their kind of reluctancy to accept BTS in the general field or major category.
Right, and staying with that, Hugh, do tell us a bit more about the actual response over in the US with regard to the snub that Youngdae has just mentioned.
Well, I will say something before we dive into that, and that's the word snub is thrown around a lot, and I understand it, but just because a song, an album, an artist isn't nominated, that doesn't necessarily make it a snub. There are a couple of things every year that are really regarded as snubs, and everything else, it's sort of, it's very competitive. There just isn't room for everybody. Having said that, I personally do believe that BTS not being nominated for Record of the Year is a snub, and I think a lot of American media did pick up on that. I only say that because last year they also were not nominated. Some people thought they might, and I did not feel that was the same snub as it was this year. I think a lot of American media has wisened up a lot more to who BTS is, their talent, their success. So a lot of publications predicted that their song Butter would be nominated for Record of the Year, Song of the Year. So when it wasn't, it was surprising, but not the biggest shock that's ever happened at the Grammys.
Right, I see.
It's happening every year. After the nomination of Grammy, there's always snubs and surprises. And let's not forget that hip hop was not even winning. Still, was not the winner in the major category album of the year. So maybe it's a long way to go. But let's not forget that Grammy is actually trying hard to include more diverse voting members, Asian, female, diverse backgrounds with different ethnicity and race. So I think we're really close. We're close to that change. We're the kind of middle of that change right now. But again, like you mentioned, BTS, without no doubt, I think one of the biggest snub this year's Grammy nomination.
Right. Youngdae, BTS members, they also spoke out against racism this past Sunday during their concert in LA. Do you see their message perhaps as resonating within the community there?
Well, I think the biggest impact that they could possibly make is the army itself. Not just the music, not just the lyrics they have written, or not just some campaign or the donation itself. I think that relationship, really unique relationship between BTS Army, they together as a kind of one group would make a change, whatever change they are. In American society, Asian American voices or Asian voices are so underrated, so underrepresented, and things are still remaining the same in a lot of cases. But someone like BTS, they're actually outsider. They're Asian, but they're not Asian American. But with the backup of these huge global fandoms who believe that there's got to be a change within American society, they really started to make a change, not because they feel that situation is bad or there's injustice, because they're really trying hard to prove that the message and attitude and sincerity of BTS can change the world and change that situation. So I think that motivation is really strong. It's not based on the logic. It's not based on some theory or book or agenda, but that kind of a sense of coalition, sense of collaboration between these two, like artists and fans, under the same purpose to spread the good message that BTS has been trying to represent since the very first day of their career. So in that sense, it's a kind of totally new type of agenda and movement rather than political or social type of campaign.
Right, I would say it's remarkable actually, because back in June last year, Hugh, BTS donated $1 million to the Black Lives Matter movement, and within 24 hours of that donation, the army made the same donation, right? Yeah. Keeping that in mind, what are your thoughts on BTS's potential role, perhaps, in raising awareness of or rallying support behind issues of universal interest?
BTS has a platform like very few people in the world or groups in the world. They can put something on social media and it's a headline. They can, as you said, make a donation, and their fan base is so tapped in and they're so connected and communicative that they will repeat that. Having said that, BTS could pick up any cause they want and raise money or make a donation or anything they like, but I believe that the biggest impact they're having right now, and perhaps that they will have, their legacy, will be simply their success. And by that I mean, America and largely the Western world has never seen a group like BTS. We've never had an Asian group or an Asian act hit #1 or be nominated for the Grammys or bring their sound and their language and their culture to us. They break barriers every time they have a new hit or their album goes to #1 or they sell out a stadium in LA. So I'm happy to see them speak out and make donations, but I believe they will be remembered simply for succeeding like no one else before them ever had and opening doors that were previously closed.
Right. Meanwhile, Youngdae, going back to the Grammy Awards, what are your prospects with regard to BTS's winning of the Best Group Performance title?
Oh my God, 50-50, I think. They're probably going to win, but whether they win or not, I think that the accomplishment is still the same. We're talking about the artist with his resume of Grammy nomination. We talk about how many nominations they would get, not how many nominations, but not winning actually. You know, it's nonsense. So, but again, it will be amazing, not just for Korean audience, Korean people, or BTS or ARMY themselves, but for the music industry. It's refreshing. It will be refreshing moment for people like you mentioned before. It's kind of symbolic movement, symbolic event that BTS as Asian artist, boy band, pop act singing in Korean mostly, would win this big category in most conservative award in the world, Grammy, would give a lot of new imagination and inspiration to the younger generation and other fellow Asian artists. I think that the trend is actually happening. Anderson .Paak, her, BTS, Asian heritage or Asian American artists, they're now leading the trend. So I'm glad BTS as Korean artist, as Korean critic, it's big part of that kind of big flow.
Right, it is. Hugh, do you suppose BTS is also having an impact on the US pop scene?
I think they will. I think in two ways. And one is, I bet if we went into the email inbox of BTS's management or their record label, every single pop artist in America is begging for a collaboration, because when BTS releases a song, it goes to #1 and it dominates. I mean, they've done it themselves. They just did it with Coldplay. So they are now the act that you want to work with if you want to be successful in America. And they were able to do that in just a few years. So I hope we see a lot more collaborations, duets. I see them working with other artists. And I think they are going to help bring back boy bands and local groups. And I hope that we see the American charts open up to non-white, non-American, non-Western acts that are singing in other languages or performing in other styles that we've never seen before or heard before. So I don't know that their specific sound will be heard in what other people do, but I think they're drastically going to change the landscape of what pop sounds and looks like in the next few years.
Right. Here in Korea, there is quite a bit of debate about possible military exemptions for BTS members. Keeping that in mind, Hugh, what do you believe would be the repercussions, perhaps, of a halt in the group's music activities to enlist?
Well, I think we're waiting to find out what that would look like. Maybe other people know better, but...
Hugh, I think we have a problem with the audio. We're losing you.
Oh, any better?
Yes, I can hear you now.
So I think we have to wait and find out what exactly would happen. Would BTS go on hiatus entirely? Would they continue with a few members missing? I don't have the answer to that, of course, but I think if they went away, we would miss them. They're just such a dominant force right now in radio and pop culture and the charts. Having said that, I think if they took a break, they would be welcomed back warmly. I also think now that they have succeeded as they have, there's room for other Korean acts, Asian acts, etc. So, if BTS went away for a while, maybe someone would step in the interim. That would be interesting to see.
Right, another K-pop group perhaps then. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Right, and staying with that, Youngdae, if BTS were to enlist, what do you suppose would be their chances of staging perhaps a sensational comeback, as Hugh has predicted?
Well, I don't exactly know what would happen. I think, well, one thing I would like to add to what Hugh mentioned is that, well, at this point, the whole debate about the military exemption is not really about BTS or this particular situation. It's more of a kind of political debate between like 2 or 3 different parties and with their own agenda. So I'm kind of suspicious whether this is actually for them or for any K-pop artist. Do I believe that we need a kind of moment that pop artists should be treated well or treated fairly compared to other classical musicians or other type of artists? Yes, but should that be right at this moment using BTS names or this type of situation, American Music or Billboard or Grammy? I think not. I think this would, I don't know, for music fan like me, you know, talking about BTS only as this kind of issue rather than, you know, make a fair judgment or a fair assessment on their music, their artistry. I think it's almost like a, I think insult to the status of BTS as an artist, global
Which is probably
artist.
why there is so much debate over this.
Yeah, well, the point is, it definitely needs to have a substantial, you know, content. You know, certain times, you know, we have to talk about all the advantage and disadvantage, and what are the reaction from different sides of industry. What would an expert would say about this? BTS never mentioned anything about that. ARMY, they're just frustrating. They're almost sick and tired of this situation where BTS, the name of BTS coming up again and again, and after, you know, every time they won a award and things like that. So again, I think at this point, the nature of debate is more of a political than cultural. So that's my biggest frustration.
Right. Well, staying on the cultural aspect of BTS, they will continue to outlive perhaps the relevance of the Grammy Awards. That you agree then?
Yeah.
All right, Young, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts today. And Hugh, right over in the US, thank you very much for your time and your insights as well.
Thank you so much.
Right, well, on that note, we end this edition of the Daily Report. Do join us again tomorrow. That would be Thursday. In the meantime, thank you for watching.